Hello everyone, my name is Jacob, and this is the first ever episode of the GamesBound editorial show thing. So that's exciting. I've done a couple of these in the past, but not on this channel, not under the GamesBound name. So this is exciting. I'm hoping to do a lot more of these in the future. But yeah, I figure for this first episode, we talk about kind of takeaways from E3 2018. The conference itself ended like 2 weeks ago at this point, but I'm still thinking about it. I have all these ideas and thoughts in my head, so I figured this would be the best way for me to expel some of those thoughts. And so I'm going to be giving my takeaways, one takeaway per major press conference, and not focusing on like the games and what I'm most excited about, just kind of my thoughts on the company in general and the way they approach their press conference. And so we're just going to go in order. And so that means we're going to start with EA. So takeaway number one, we should probably stop hoping that EA is going to change. So EA isn't exactly known for their high-octane press conferences. Like, we all know that they're basically the bottom tier press conference of E3. They never really do anything that really excites us. Sometimes they announce something that we think is maybe kind of cool, but then past that, we just don't care until we see more of it later down the line. But for some reason, we still get excited for EA's press conferences. Maybe we just hope that they'll change, that maybe they'll finally understand and shift their press conference styles to closer to Sony or Microsoft, things like that. And we had reason to think that they might change because they said that they were going to be showing off Anthem a little bit more. We were going to see a new trailer. We knew we would probably see gameplay, kind of get a bigger idea of what that game is going to be. We knew that Andrea Renee was going to host, who is kind of a renowned games journalist. She does a lot of great work for What's Good Games and Kind of Funny Games Daily. Just really knows her stuff, and it was super exciting to hear that she was going to be hosting the event. And we thought maybe, just maybe, we might get a little tease of what Respawn's Star Wars game is, because we've been hearing about it for years, but we never got any official details or anything. And especially after Visceral Studios closed down, we thought maybe this would be the year where we get some good news in terms of their Star Wars games, because, you know, Visceral closed down and that game is kind of in limbo right now, and Battlefront 2 had all the microtransactions trouble, so we thought maybe a Respawn is our only hope for the Star Wars brand. And so, you know, we had some hope for this press conference. But then we watched the press conference and we just got some really weird just things that bummed me out. Like, we got a 5-minute demo for a Command & Conquer mobile game that nobody asked for. We got an awkward introduction to the Respawn Star Wars game. It's clearly a ways off. It was just the title. Clearly they weren't ready to even talk about it. It was probably a bad move to even mention it. And then they had a way too long explanation of the Champions League coming to FIFA. And as someone who loves FIFA and soccer, like, that's super exciting, but that's not press conference worthy. That's not E3 worthy. And it's just such a weird press conference. So many weird things that they chose to focus on, like Command & Conquer, like the Champions League. And, you know, what's the point of getting Andrea Renee to host if you're going to have her for like 3 minutes total of the press conference? I think EA is aware that there is a problem. I think they have to know that they are year in, year out the worst press conference. They have to know that they're the butt of the joke, but they just don't know how to fix the problem. They don't know how to adequately address the changes that they need to make. And it's just so weird. I feel like every year, E3 for them, like, every year they get into this bad car crash. Like, not even, like, it's their own fault. They just ran headfirst into a tree. And they try to walk out of the car, they have, like, a broken arm, a ruptured spleen, and bruised ribs or something. Like, okay, EA, maybe you should go to the hospital real quick. Like, no, we've been through this before. We can just, like, throw some Band-Aids on and we'll all be fixed. And we say, maybe, like, I think you have a concussion. I think you seriously need to see a doctor. And they say, do you want to see NBA Live? I really have to work on my analogies. Number 2, Microsoft doesn't like coming to E3 without a ruler. I feel like, especially in the past 5 years or so, E3 press conferences have been just evolving in what they can be and what they should be. Like, you see Nintendo, since 2013, they've been doing Nintendo Directs instead of their live press conferences and things like that, which is kind of just a unique way to do those conferences in general. And then you see Sony, who since 2015, when they had that crazy Final Fantasy VII, Shenmue 3, Last Guardian year, they've just been doing like their own thing, and they shifted from the more competitive press conference where they talk about this is why you should be with us and not Xbox, and they changed from that to the more casual, more camaraderie kind of thing where they just want to talk to you about the cool games that they've been working on. They just want to show them off, and it's just a much more casual, much more friendly, and honestly much more exciting environment. Not so for Microsoft. They still have that confident, cocky, competitive voice and tone in all of their press conferences. They still use that really slow, arrogant voice for all their talking in the press conferences. Like, you always see Phil Spencer talking super slowly as if, not to confuse us normies who can't possibly understand the depths of the video game industry. And ever since Sony kind of rocked them at the beginning of this generation, Xbox has really stuck to that competitive nature, as if like they want to come back and combat that slow start, and they just always have this chip on their shoulder. It's just like they are like Biff from Back to the Future. They're always looking to start a fight. They just walk into the old diner and they just want to beat up that kid that they see. And you see this like last year, they had those dumb t-shirts that were like, you just witnessed the most powerful console in history. It was just so dumb. It's just, stop doing that. That's just comes off badly. And then they try to wrap it up even more this year, where they start off the press conference and they're talking about like, you'll see 50 games in today's press conference. And of course, like most of those, we just saw for like 2 seconds in the indie montage. But you know what they say, it's all about the destination, not the journey, So yeah, it just stinks because Microsoft had such a good conference. They had Cyberpunk, they had Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, they had a Halo Infinite, they had Gears 5, but they just couldn't let the year go by without trying to flex. And I think a big thing about Microsoft the past few years is their lack of first-party games, especially in comparison to Sony. And in this conference, they tried to address that. They announced their new studio, The Initiative, and they also announced that they bought 4 new studios. When Phil Spencer said earlier this year that they were going to be focusing on making more first-party games, I thought that was going to mean that they were, developing more games for the Xbox One. But apparently what that meant was that they would be buying more developers to make games for them. And I just think that's kind of scummy. It's kind of a defensive move. It doesn't seem like they're trying to make more exclusive games for the Xbox. It seems like they're just trying to keep games away from the PS4. And I think defensive is a good one-word descriptor of Microsoft's conferences for the past few years. Because I think Microsoft was also assuming that Sony was going to start talking about the PS5 at their press conference this year. And they weren't, of course. They told us that they were just going to be talking about 4 games, but then Microsoft couldn't help themselves. And they told us that they were still working on the next generation of Xbox consoles, which of course we know that they're still working on them. But just the fact that they acknowledged it, and now we know that they're called Xbox Scarlet, it just pisses me off, because there's no way that that thing comes out until 2020 at the earliest. But whatever. I think the point of this whole thing is that, Microsoft is still scarred by how poorly they did in comparison to the PS4 at the beginning of this generation's life cycle. And they've just been playing catch up. And I hope they get over that soon, because this was a really good conference. This was a really good press conference. They had a lot of really good games that they showed, but just they need to check their attitude, because that was the only detractor for me. That's what kept me from making this my number 1 press conference of the conference. And takeaway number 3, Bethesda doesn't really know what to do with themselves. So Bethesda has been doing this whole E3 press conference thing for a few years at this point. The first one was back in 2015 when they first talked about Fallout 4, because they announced that and released it in the same year. 2016 was more like not all over the place, but more spread out instead of just focusing on Fallout 4. They talked about Dishonored 2, they talked about Prey, they talked about Quake Champions, things like that. And then 2017, last year, they especially ramped it up. They did a thing called Bethesda Land, which is like their theme park. It was much more direct-like, where it was basically just a video. Pete Hines came out and talked one time, and then got off the stage, and it was basically just this one continuous video. And then this year, they did something else. I appreciate that they've been keeping the format loose. They're trying new things, new types of ways to do these press conferences. But this year just felt off for some reason, especially the first half. They kept bringing out these developers to read this super awkward script from a teleprompter, while they primarily talked about DLC and re-releases and things like that. And I just kind of felt gross. The entire thing just kind of felt disjointed. The developers didn't necessarily seem into it. Also, they needed a scriptwriter because, what they were reading was not great. I just felt awkward and uncomfortable. Thankfully, the entire press conference was basically saved when Todd Howard came out on stage, who's a pro. For this whole second half, he basically did stand up the entire time. And so yeah, Todd Howard was great. He talked about Fallout 76, which had a great showing. He also showed that Elder Scrolls mobile game, which seems interesting. They also showed Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 for the first time, which was exciting, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that they just wanted to shut us up and make us stop asking about those games. But yeah, I just don't think they've necessarily found their stride in how they format these press conferences, because the games they show are incredibly good. All of the games that they most of the games that they showed outside of the Elder Scrolls card game and things like that are all incredibly good. I might not end up playing all of them, but they all look really good and they showed well. But just the way that they show those games and how they go from game to game and have all those talking from developers, it just seemed inconsistent in their messaging. Because they can go from we're the #1 publisher on Metacritic to we're a family company to stop asking about Elder Scrolls 6. It's changing between all three of these at a drop of a hat. And that was all 3 different tones in the same press conference. And I just think that Bethesda needs to work on that as a whole. Number 4, Final Fantasy VII Remake is really far off. Number 5, Ubisoft has become the feel-good hit of the summer. I'll be honest, I've never been huge into Ubisoft games. I don't play a lot of them. I've never really played Assassin's Creed for more than an hour. I never played The Division. I've never played, Watch Dogs. I've never really been interested in Skull and Bones. But just watching those press conferences make me feel good, especially in the past couple of years. Because Ubisoft has definitely had their issues. They had the whole Mr. Caffeine host guy a few years back, and that was really weird. And then there's been the whole fiasco with Vivendi and their impending hostile takeover of Ubisoft, which has thankfully this year been kind of pushed off for the time being. But just watching these Ubisoft press conferences just makes me feel jolly. I think that's the word for it. Just because, there's a lot of feel-good moments in these press conferences. Trials Rising was a really fun moment, seeing that on stage. It was a really cool presenter. Beyond Good and Evil 2 with the hit record connection and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that was really nice to see. That Grant Kirkhope live performance was super good. It's always cool to see Nintendo with their connections to Ubisoft with that Starlink and Star Fox crossover, even though I don't think that Miyamoto was fully aware of what was going on when they brought him off stage. And I was even skeptical of Assassin's Creed returning to its yearly formula, especially after doing Origins, and that was such a success, taking a year off for that. But Odyssey, I'll be honest, it looks great, and the reaction to it seems really good. I don't think I have any big complaints from that press conference. Although I could have done without Just Dance 2019. And that Rainbow Six Siege documentary was kind of weird. And For Honor number 6, it's hard for Sony not to be good. Theoretically, this year should have been kind of a filler press conference year for Sony. It's just one of those years where they told us all 4 games that they were going to be extensively showing off in this press conference. We knew it was going to be Death Stranding, Spider-Man, The Last of Us Part 2, and Ghost of Tsushima. And so it's kind of one of those years where we know all of the big announcements. It's one of those years where you think, okay, we have to get all of these games out, and then maybe next year or the year after, we'll see those big announcements come back, and we'll have that crazy 2015, 2016 E3 press conference year. But it was still a really good show. That Last of Us Part 2 demo was insane, and Spider-Man looks so good. And even past that, they had these really great trailers that we didn't know about, like Resident Evil 2 finally being revealed. That looks amazing. Neo 2, things like that. The new Remedy game, Control, looks really good. And they had the best Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer of the show. That one was my favorite. I wasn't expecting Pirates of the Caribbean to come back, but surprisingly it looks good. And okay, yeah, sure, that weird intermission thing was really bad. It was probably the lowest point of all of the press conferences combined. But somehow, even with that, Sony found a way to be one of the best press conferences of E3, and I think that speaks volumes to the confidence that Sony has in their first-party properties, and just how good their studios are at presenting good demos at E3. And I think at this point, it's just hard to see Sony really fall flat in their face. And I think that's exciting, really impressive, and also kind of scary for when they do fall on their face eventually. And finally, number 7, Nintendo just sees E3 as another day in the office. Because if it was such a big deal to them, we would have seen Metroid Prime 4, we would have seen Animal Crossing for the Switch, and we definitely would have seen that weird Star Fox racing game that Retro Studios is supposed to be working on. Which, by the way, I'm beginning to doubt that exists, because I feel like it leaked at, the peak time of E3 rumor mill season, and we have not seen any of it. And it kind of makes me nervous and a little annoyed, because there have been 5 E3s since Retro's last game, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and we have heard nothing. And I know they should let it cook. I hate it when games are announced too early, but please hurry, because I just really want to know what Retro is working on. If it's a new IP, if it's Star Fox, if it's Donkey Kong, I just need to know, because Retro does really good stuff. But yeah, I was initially a little sad that there's so little shown in this direct, so little in terms of first party big stuff. Because we had Smash, we had Fire Emblem, but that was really it in terms of the first party stuff. But once I put on the goggles that this was just normal Nintendo Direct, where really the only distinguishing factor was the fact that Reggie was in the show. Once you put on those goggles, it kind of takes the sting out of it a little bit. Plus, I think that Animal Crossing for Switch is a lock for the September Direct. And if it isn't, then we riot. Because if I can't live in a peaceful animal virtual village, then there can be no peace at all. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Those were my takeaways for E3 2018. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the points I made. I'd love to hear it. Also, I'm hoping to make this editorial show a more regular thing. So whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, I kind of want to make it a scheduled occurrence. So let me know if there are any special topics that you want me to talk about. I have a list of ideas that I think I want to do videos about, but I'd love to get some input as to what you want to hear. So yeah, just let me know. Thanks for watching. I hope you tune in next time. We'll have more podcasts, editorials, and gameplays coming out soon enough. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, just wanted to put a little addendum at the end of this week's editorial, just because I had something else to talk about that didn't really fit under the umbrella of the E3 2018 takeaways kind of thing. So I just wanted to talk about real quick the presentation of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee at Nintendo's Direct at E3 this year. I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical of this game when we first heard about it through those leaks, because I've always wanted a full-scale 3D Pokemon Red and Blue remake, but then we heard more details about it, and the fact that it was like a top-down game again, and the Pokemon Go integration just made me really nervous. But then this presentation at E3 put all of those fears to rest, and a lot of that comes from the Pokeball controller. That's $50, and with that controller comes Mew, the legendary Pokemon. And Mew was such a cool part of the original Pokemon Red and Blue games, because it was just this mythical thing. Like, everybody was part of this zeitgeist, trying to find out how you catch Mew, things like that. Like, there were the rumors that you have to like push the truck in Vermilion City and you find Mew underneath, and there's just this whole really cool environment, this atmosphere around the game of trying to find Mew, and it just brought the whole world of Pokemon to new heights, kind of that context of the game. But the only thing about it was the fact that literally like anyone could get Mew, and why am I supposed to work my ass off and get all the other 150 Pokemon, and then some poor person can just come in and get Mew willy-nilly? Like, they don't deserve it. Like, I'm a paying customer, okay? I want to thank Nintendo for finally taking a stand on this issue and making Mew behind this paywall, because it really means a lot. And you know what, Nintendo? I salute you.